So it's mid-April in 2016 and I thought I'd do a piece on the iPad Pro. I don't know anything about the iPad Pro except it was released late last year, and it's got a faster processor than the previous iPads. We're now in the era where we've got the iPad mini, the iPad Air, you know, all sorts of stuff. I'm looking at a thing called The Week, it's called, theweek.co.uk, and I just use this as a way of getting the comparison. And this is what they are saying. So it's iPad Pro versus the Air 2 versus iPad Mini 4. I'm not giving them a lot of credit because actually it's not a very good review in some ways. Yeah, obviously iPad Pro's bigger, it's got a bigger keyboard, and you could say the obvious things like it's lacking portability. The big things against it turn out to be, there's an issue with the cameras, for example. Now that we're in a post-HD era, I mean all my cameras are HD, that's what I'm filming with now, an Akin that does HD. And 720p is very much like the basic now, and that P is really important. I don't know if you know much about the camera side of things, but when you look into it, the little P on the end of those things is really important. So the basic ones are 720p, 1080p, which is HD, what I would call full HD resolution. A lot of people refer to as that. And do not touch something that's got an I on the end. It means interlaced, and it means they're trying to give you a high number without actually giving you quality. So for example, 1080i is less good than 720p. Okay, so okay. And then you've got the 4K stuff. And so you've got Ultra HD and whatever you want to call it. So now, I mean, basically we've moved into a position where these little 1.2 megapixel cameras that iPads have for facing you, just keeping the iPad alive, these little 1.2 megapixel cameras, now I've seen them say that these do 720p. I think it must be 720p, but not as we know it, because I'm not aware that a 1.2 megapixel camera can do that. I've got other cameras for taking action shots on motorcycles and stuff, and those cameras need a 5 megapixel to get 1080p. But doing 720p with just a 1.2 megapixel camera, I don't know. It's I'm not sure what they're quoting there, because sometimes you'll get megapixels quoted and they're actually the megapixels that they're using for still shots, not for video shots. It seems to be a different part of the design, part of the system that does that. So it's all a bit vague. But the main thing is this: Apple have a track record of producing things like the iPad 4. I mean, you can see on it I've put don't upgrade to iOS 8. I've actually missed out iOS 8 completely, and I had 7 on this and I went straight to 9. So that was a whole year of not upgrading. That's why the sign's there, so the kids don't accidentally accept upgrade from Apple. I could tear that off now. But the Apple tendency to produce one, like just before this iPad 4 was produced, there was an iPad 3, and it'd only been out a few months. Loads of people went and bought it because there's quite a gap. There's quite a time when the iPad 2 was out there. And then they all of a sudden introduced the iPad 3, I think it's less than 6 months later. It caught a lot of people out. And the iPad 3 is basically a dog. So all the people that bought the iPad 3s, and this isn't just me saying this, several other people said this, they wouldn't have brought out the iPad 4 if the 3 was actually any good. So something very strange happened there. I just took so long deliberating, I went and bought the iPad 4 because I was virtually on the verge of buying, and then they announced I was going to buy an iPad 3, and then they announced they made a 4. I thought, oh, that was lucky. And then of course they sneaked out one that had more memory a few months later, so even though I bought at the right time, I would probably like to have delayed by a couple of months and got the 128GB version. Why does this matter for an iPad Pro? Well, it matters because you're kinda in the same position. I think they brought out the iPad Pro, and there's certain things that you can see from people who have done serious examinations, not the week's examination, but serious examinations. Like the battery is quite small, and even at that small size compared to the size of the tablet, at 12.9 inches or whatever it is, it's really a case that the battery takes ages to charge. Now somebody says, there was a much better review somewhere where they said you can cobble together a Mac, an Apple Mac charger of some sort, or something like that, and you can make it charge it, and there's a special lead you can buy, and that will charge the battery, presumably safely, the guy tried it, a lot faster, in a couple of hours, or 3 hours, or 4 hours, or something, instead of taking overnight. So not only have they given it a bit of a small battery, but and there's quite a bit of space, you see, where people think they should have been putting a battery in the iPad Pro, but they've also made it so it actually charges up incredibly slowly. So there's that. Then there's the fact that the cameras are so cruddy. Why not just fit better quality cameras for the price of the iPad Pro? Why not fit the same camera front and back, and then just have it that if somebody wants a lower resolution at the front for reasons of size or whatever, but I think you can get up to 256 gigabyte now, so perhaps memory use isn't such a problem. Why not just fit the better cameras front and back, and then give someone the choice of setting that they want the front one to use a lower resolution today because they're doing something they don't want to take up too much room, or being able to set it to 720p instead of 1080p. Why not just do that? The point is, with their track record, you're waiting for Apple to bring out another iPad Pro. And the iPad, I think there's an Air or Mini Air or something that's actually got a better quality of camera than the iPad Pro. There's something funny about the whole thing. As we sit in mid-April 2016, I look at the spec of the iPad Pro and I think now they've left a lot of room to suddenly bring out the next version, which is a lot better. I'd be very surprised if we get as far as Christmas 2016, the end of the year 2016, and they haven't produced another iPad Pro. I'll be very surprised. It wouldn't surprise me at all if it was already in production and they're just knocking out the iPad Pros, not building anymore, but knocking out the ones they've got. Now, you could always say that you're waiting for new technology, you're waiting for the next version, and you could never buy something. I think the iPad Pro is a pretty good thing depending on what you want to do. It's got more real estate on the screen. But there are some smaller iPad versions where the density, and therefore the quality that you get of the pixels or whatever, is better. So the only real problem with the iPad Pro is you're waiting for the next version to come out. It looks to me as ripe for something else to come out. In a similar way, there's other things that are missing from the Apple lineup. They had a mega Apple machine, I forget what it was called, but it was a tower thing. And now they've gone for these little boxes. But they've never really replaced the super powerful unit, I don't think. And so, to me, those are maybe two market segments. The iPad Pro is ripe for them just to replace it next week or any time. And the big mega powerful machine, they don't seem to have really produced one since they had that last tower. So, like, this review is the iPad Pro versus the iPad Air 2 versus the iPad Mini 4. I understand those each have niche parts of the market. But the iPad Pro, at the most expensive, while it's got better sound quality and stuff, I just think it's horribly like they're going to bring out another one. So even if I had the cash, I'd still be thinking to myself, I'm frightened they'll do an iPad 3 on me. I'm frightened that Apple Corp will pull another iPad 3 episode on me. I'll go out and buy the iPad Pro, and then there'll be a 2 out before you know it. And that's a bit of a concern. There's only reviews like this that are glowing omit to mention the things that are amiss with it or adrift, or the history that Apple have got of dropping suddenly a product and pulling out another one, and you're just left with the day after they released the iPad Pro 2, the market for a second-hand iPad Pro is going to be bugger all. There's a market for it at price, of course, but you won't be selling it at, like, you know, let's say you buy an iPad Pro at 700 quid. The day after the iPad Pro 2 comes out, you will not be selling that iPad Pro, the first version, at 600 quid, or even maybe 550. I think you'll be sub 500, and the only thing people will be buying it for is for the big screen, and it just depends what the two would come out with. But that's the trouble. We're I think, waiting for the rather obvious successor to the iPad Pro, and that would be a machine probably worth buying. Thanks for watching and listening.